The lock clicked once, sharp as a gunshot in the quiet hallway, and the door to my wife's bedroom swung open like it belonged to her. Marjorie Bell, president of our HOA board, didn't knock, didn't hesitate, didn't even announce herself. She just stepped in with that smug little smile she wore whenever she thought she owned the world. Clipboard in one hand, key ring in the other. She called it a routine inspection. I called it what it was, trespassing. She didn't notice the faint red light glowing from the corner or the soft hum of the sensor she'd just triggered. What she didn't know was that I wired that house myself, and nothing she touched escaped my cameras. My name's Ethan Caldwell. I'm an electrician used to wire security systems for government buildings, high-clearance sites, places where trust isn't enough. So yeah, I know a thing or two about keeping people out. And when my wife Rachel nearly had a breakdown after someone tried to break into our old house years ago, I swore she'd never feel unsafe again. That bedroom. That was her sanctuary. I rebuilt every inch of it. New locks, reinforced frames, soft blue walls that finally let her sleep without waking at every sound. For the first time in years, she felt peace. Until Marjorie Bell used that damn master key. The HOA said the key was for emergency inspections, but I'd never signed anything giving them that right. None of us had. Still, they acted like gods, fining people for the color of their mailboxes, the angle of their lawn sprinklers, even the length of a shadow cast by a tree. It was control pure and simple, and most neighbors just paid up and kept quiet. But me, I've seen what power does when no one pushes back. I sat in my office that night watching Marjorie on the security feed, flipping pages on her clipboard while standing next to my wife's nightstand, next to the photo of us from our wedding, and I swear my blood turned electric. The footage ended. I leaned back in my chair, hands shaking, trying to breathe through the rage. My wife didn't even know yet. I couldn't tell her not until I had a plan. Because proof alone doesn't change anything. Not in this kind of neighborhood. Not when the queen of the HOA has everyone too scared to speak. The next morning I went for a walk around the community pool. That's where people whispered, the only place they felt safe venting, thinking the board wasn't listening. I heard enough in 10 minutes to know this wasn't a one-time thing. My medicine cabinet was open when I got home, one woman whispered. They said it was a safety check. Another man muttered, my garage opener disappeared and showed up 2 days later. She said she was testing security access. Same story, different houses. And all of them ended with the same phrase, just pay it. Don't make her angry. That's when I knew it wasn't just about Rachel anymore. This woman had turned an entire neighborhood into her private kingdom, and the rest of us were her subjects. I started quietly digging, talking to people, collecting their letters, their finds, their stories, and that's when I noticed someone watching me. David Harlan, the HOA treasurer. He was always quiet at meetings, never argued, never smiled either. I caught him sitting under an umbrella at the pool, pretending to read a spreadsheet. When I mentioned Marjorie's inspection, his pen froze mid-air. He didn't say a word, but his silence said enough. That night, a new envelope showed up in my mailbox. HOA seal, crisp paper, bold letters. Violation, unauthorized security installations. Fine, $1,500. Due in 10 days. I laughed an ugly sound that came out more like a growl. She'd seen the sensors in Rachel's room and now she was using them against me. Retaliation plain and simple. Rachel stood beside me, reading it, arms wrapped around herself. She's coming after us, she whispered. I nodded. Then it's time she learns what happens when you pick the wrong family. I spent that night in the city library. Not the kind of battlefield most people imagine, but for me it was war. I dug through property statutes, HOA bylaws, and state codes until my eyes blurred. And there it was. HOAs can fine you for paint colors? Yes. They can regulate lawn height? Sure. But they cannot under any law enter a private bedroom without explicit permission. What Marjorie did wasn't policy, it was unlawful entry. And when she fined me afterward, that became retaliation. For a moment, though, I hesitated. I sat there staring at those legal pages and wondered if I was going too far. Maybe I should just pay the fine, let it go, keep Rachel safe by keeping the peace. Maybe I was the one escalating things. That doubt, it ate at me for days. Because sometimes it's easier to live small than to stand tall. But that illusion shattered when I saw Rachel sitting on the edge of the bed one morning, her hands trembling as she tried to lock the door twice, then 3 times. She whispered, "I don't feel safe here anymore." That was the moment I knew I wasn't wrong. I'd just been quiet too long. So I went to see David. The HOA office smelled like lemon cleaner and paper. He was hunched over the desk counting invoices. When he saw me, he jumped like I'd caught him stealing. "Long day?" I asked. He nodded too fast. I leaned closer and said quietly, "You know what she did last night, don't you?" His eyes went wide. For a second he tried to speak, but all that came out was, I don't get involved in inspections." He couldn't even look at me. The man was crumbling under the weight of secrets. I left him there shaking because I knew he wasn't ready yet, but he would be. 2 days later, Marjorie struck again. This time she sent a private towing company to take my work van from my driveway. My tools, my contracts, my livelihood, everything was inside. I stepped outside barefoot, the sun glaring in my eyes, and there she was across the street, sipping her coffee, smiling. She didn't even hide it anymore. She wanted to humiliate me in front of the neighbors. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I took out my phone, photographed the truck, the men, and her smug face. "You touch that van," I told them, "and I'll file a report for unlawful seizure. That's grand theft in this state. You want your names on it?" They looked at each other, mumbled something about checking the paperwork, then got back in the truck and left. Marjorie turned away, but not before I saw it, the crack in her mask. Fear. Finally. That night I stayed in my workshop downtown, surrounded by coils of wire solder smoke and the low hum of my server fans. I spread out every piece of evidence on the table, the footage of her breaking in, the fine letter, the photos from that morning. It was all there. A pattern violation, retaliation, escalation. I built a folder and labeled it Bell Liability. I wasn't going to yell or fight her in the street. I was going to dismantle her piece by piece until her whole empire fell apart under its own weight. And then, just when I was ready to move, there came a knock on my door late one night. It was David. Sweat on his brow, baseball cap twisted in his hands, eyes darting like a man expecting to be followed. "She's been using that key for years," he whispered. "Not just on you, on half the neighborhood." He sat on my couch, shaking, and spilled everything, the records, the entries, the lies. Every time she checked out that master key, he had to log it. Bedrooms, garages, closets. She called them safety checks, but they were invasions. And when anyone complained, she buried them in fines until they shut up. I looked him dead in the eyes. "David, this has to stop. You have the logs." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll get them. But if she finds out, I'm done." He left that night shaking like a leaf, but I knew he'd come through. And 2 days later, he did. Late evening knock again. He shoved a manila envelope into my hands, voice barely a whisper. "Don't tell anyone where you got it." Then he was gone. Inside, years of entries. Every time that key was removed, signed out by Marjorie Bell herself. It was the smoking gun. I scanned every page, cross-referenced every date with my footage, my fines, my notes. It all lined up. I backed everything up, 3 copies, 3 different locations. If she thought she could bury me, she'd be the one buried. Then came the HOA meeting, the showdown. The community clubhouse was packed, rows of folding chairs, neighbors murmuring the faint hum of the AC. Marjorie sat at the center of the board table, polished and poised gavel resting in front of her like a weapon. David was there too, pale hands clenched in his lap. She opened the meeting with that same condescending tone. "Before we begin, I'd like to address the recent rumors regarding unauthorized security installations." She smiled directly at me. "We cannot tolerate residents undermining community safety." That was my cue. I stood up slowly, black case in hand. "You want to talk about unauthorized actions? Marjorie, let's talk about trespassing." Gasps rippled through the crowd. She straightened in her chair, still smiling. "Mr. Caldwell, this is not, I pressed a button. The monitor behind her flickered to life. A still frame froze on the screen. Marjorie Bell standing in my wife's bedroom, clipboard in hand. You could see the picture of Rachel on the dresser behind her. The room went silent. Then someone whispered, "That's inside his house." Marjorie's face tightened. "That image is misleading standard inspection protocol." I laid the printed key logs across the table in front of her. "Every time you used that key, every house you stepped into, every violation you wrote after the fact. It's all here in your handwriting." Voices exploded behind me. She was in my garage. My cabinet was open too. She used that key on my home. Marjorie slammed the gavel. "Order. These are lies. Fabrications." I clicked the remote again. The video rolled. Crystal clear footage of her unlocking Rachel's door, stepping inside, jotting notes, leaving without a word. The noise in the room shifted: anger, disbelief, fury. And through it all, David finally spoke. His voice cracked but carried. "No, Marjorie. It's not lies. I've kept the records. I know what you've done." The gavel slipped from her hand. The crowd surged, shouting for her resignation, demanding answers. The board members looked around like rats trapped on a sinking ship. And for the first time, Marjorie didn't look powerful. She looked small. Within 24 hours, the insurance company suspended the HOA's coverage pending investigation. 2 board members resigned immediately. David turned over the rest of the logs officially signed. The police opened a case for unlawful entry and retaliation. And the community, our quiet, scared little neighborhood, finally rose up. They called an emergency vote. And just like that, the woman who'd ruled with fines and fear was stripped of her title. The master key was confiscated, abolished for good. From now on, no one from the HOA could step foot inside a home without written consent. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Justice doesn't always roar, it sometimes just hums quietly, like the sound of a lock finally clicking shut. And that's what this story is about. The moment someone crosses the line into your home, your privacy, your dignity, you have 2 choices: stay quiet and live small, or fight back and make damn sure they never do it again.